Elden Ring is the newest medieval FromSoft game that's taking the world by storm. It seems like most review sites are giving this game a 10 out of 10, and if you look on social media, almost everyone is playing it. And so with all of this discussion about Elden Ring, I couldn't help myself, so I decided to start playing Godfall. Godfall is a looter-slasher game released in 2020 from developer Counterplay. It was a launch title for the PlayStation 5, but you can also play it on PC and coming soon PlayStation 4. Now since I saw Godfall, I've really wanted to play it, and after a long time waiting, I finally decided to start playing it this week. And to my surprise, I have a lot of thoughts only after just a couple of hours of gameplay. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my first time playing Godfall. I don't understand.
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another Carrot Scraps video, and by another, I mean the 96th. Now, I will admit that today I'm kind of repeating past mistakes. I know I said I wasn't going to do this anymore, but I'm technically recording this video while I'm on the clock at work. Look, I'm sorry, but it's hard for me to focus on work when I can't get Godfall out of my head, so I'm hoping that if I talk about it for a little bit, then I'll be able to focus on work again. That makes sense, right? That doesn't sound like an excuse. If anything, it sounds like a medical excuse. Like, that's a smart thing I just said. Don't do as I say. Wait, do as I do, not as I say. Which one is it? So when I wrote the script for this video, I only played about 2 hours of gameplay. So all of my thoughts in this video are just from my first 2 hours of gameplay with Godfall. So keep in mind that this is not an in-depth review or an analysis. This is what I'm calling a first try video, where I go over my very early experience with a game I've never tried before. Because other than a couple of trailers, I knew nothing about Godfall before starting the game. But keep in mind that I'm open to making more videos about the game once I have more to say and I've played a little bit more. The other thing to keep in mind while watching this video is that Godfall is a looter slasher. Now, if you watch the channel regularly, I'm sure you've heard this already, but I don't have a lot of experience when it comes to playing looters. I consider Marvel's Avengers my first looter, which would make Godfall my second. Technically, Fallout 76 would be my first looter, but because it handles loot so differently, I tend to not count it. So just keep that context in mind while listening to me talk about the game. Lastly, if you're not familiar with the channel, I play a lot of Marvel's Avengers because I absolutely love that game. And so, in this video, I'll be making a lot of comparisons between Avengers and Godfall. Anyway, with all of that context out of the way, let's talk about my first experience with Godfall, and let's start that discussion by talking about gameplay. So let's start by saying that I really enjoyed playing Godfall so far. For a number of reasons, I had a lot of fun and I'm excited to play again soon. At first, I'll admit the controls felt a little awkward though. Combat in a game like Avengers is really fast, and with most attacks you can cancel them pretty quickly. However, in Godfall, I felt like a lot of the combat is built around timing your attacks so you don't get stuck in an animation that leaves you vulnerable. Which is a cool design choice, but it's something that I had to get used to. At first, I wasn't super into this, until I realized that that was part of the challenge of the gameplay, and then I started enjoying the strategy of it more. Most of the combat in Godfall has bladed melee weapons at the center of its experience. Greatswords, long swords, warhammers, dual blades, pole arms, and potentially other weapons can be found and collected throughout the world. While these weapons are technically part of the loot system, I think it's really cool because depending on the type of weapon you choose, it also changes your combat gameplay. The ability to change your gameplay depending on what weapon you choose is really appealing to me. That on top of the additional stats and abilities that come with choosing loot. So for example, I don't really like how dual blades and greatswords play during gameplay. However, a long sword is exactly the speed I'm looking for, and it makes me feel most comfortable while navigating the world and fighting enemies. As a result, when I search for loot, I'm focused on this type of sword before I've even decided any kind of build for my character, and I think that's really interesting. You also have a dodge and parry system that's similar to Marvel's Avengers. The parry-dodge system from Avengers was one of the details that I thought was really unique about that game. However, even though it's similar, it does feel like a different experience with a similar philosophy, which I appreciate. As you play and earn experience points, you'll level up and can gain new abilities on a skill tree, which you can distribute elsewhere at any time, which is really nice and flexible. Another thing about the controls is that I was really surprised that there isn't a jump button. But hey, if you don't need it, it doesn't need to be there. So I'm glad that they had the foresight not to include something that wasn't important. It also reminds me of how there's no reloading in Doom Eternal. Again, there's just no reason to reload in Doom. The game is focused around other mechanics. But there are other games that would leave in those mechanics just out of habit, instead of because it's an intentional design choice. But yeah, so once I got over some of the more unique aspects of the combat, I really enjoyed the gameplay, which I'm happy about because when I first started playing, I was concerned immediately that I hated the gameplay. But I don't hate it, I just had to learn how this game specifically plays. Something I'm actually not a fan of though is the button layout on the controller. Godfall is really bizarre when it comes to this department because it feels really similar to a game like Marvel's Avengers, particularly when it comes to combat and how you fight. But heavy and light attacks are mapped to the bumpers and triggers in Godfall, whereas in Avengers, these attacks are mapped to the surface buttons. And that choice is a really odd decision in my opinion. It's taken me a lot to get used to using triggers and bumpers to use my heavy and light attacks, and I can't really see a reason why this was included this way. Not to mention, it's difficult for me to go back and forth between Avengers and Godfall. Now, when it came to this control scheme, the first thing I wanted to do was give myself custom key bindings, which I couldn't find on the console, which was super disappointing. There's even a section in the pause menu that allows you to look at the button mappings, but no, they just show you what the controller can do, and you can't really change anything after that. I'd say that even though I enjoy the combat, getting used to the heavy and light buttons being on the triggers and bumpers is the weirdest thing for me to get used to. But putting that aside, I've had a lot of fun with the combat so far. It's appealing to me in a very similar way that the combat in Avengers is appealing to me, but it still feels completely unique and I have a lot of fun with it. Now, there's definitely more to the combat system, but as the video title implies, this is just my first try with the game, so it's natural I'll miss a couple of things. For example, there are also Valor Plates, which primarily change the appearance of your character, but also have additional abilities. But I didn't really experiment with this very much during my first playthrough, so I don't have a lot to say about that. But I'm excited to learn more about that part of the game so that way I can talk more about it in the future. But what's really cool about Godfall to me so far is that the combat is really great on its own, but it gets even better when you combine that with the loot in the game. Loot is a big component in Godfall. It's how players can change their gameplay to fit them during combat, or how you can become more powerful through the pursuit of better gear. The loot in Godfall is split into multiple sections. A player can equip a primary and secondary weapon that they can switch during missions. You also have a section for a charm, an amulet, 2 rings, a stone, and a banner. All of these pieces of loot can be collected by opening chests, defeating certain enemies, and completing missions. In addition, loot drops similarly to other games, where a piece of gear will be color-coded blue, green, purple, or gold to indicate its rarity and by extension its quality. And that's a cursory understanding of the loot in Godfall. If you've seen any of my videos about Marvel's Avengers, then you know a lot of the criticisms about the game revolve around its shortcomings when it comes to loot. But I've thoroughly enjoyed that part of Avengers, potentially because I don't have the same amount of experience when it comes to looters that other players have. So with that context, what are my first impressions of the loot in Godfall? Well, I really liked it so far. And even though I still like the loot in Marvel's Avengers, I have to say I think I immediately understand a lot of the criticisms that other people had about the loot in Avengers. In Godfall, I'm already really excited and invested in the loot that I get and checking at the end of every mission. I like that I get so many cool weapons that look differently, and more importantly, that play differently. Here are just a couple of reasons why I like the loot system in Godfall so far. First of all, I'm a sword guy, so I have a strong bias there. I think it's really cool that I get so many swords, and I'm excited to look at my collection of swords. However, I think another reason why I find this particular loot system so engaging already has to do with a very simple detail: the design of the UI. I think the way information is presented in Godfall, down to the fonts that they use and the layout of the descriptions, helps my brain comprehend the information better. As I've said many times on the channel, in the past month in fact, I have dyslexia, which means I'm very sensitive to the way this kind of information is presented. And even though I still like the loot in Avengers, I genuinely think the way loot in Godfall is presented helps my brain specifically comprehend the information better, which I really appreciate. Now, these are just my initial impressions of the loot in Godfall. It's entirely possible that as time goes on, I might change my mind. It's also possible that there are parts of the loot system in this game that I'm blind to at the moment, and that the specific details of will become more clear as I play more of the game. But so far, I really like the loot system. I'm willing to say that I like the loot system better in Godfall than I do in Avengers. However, I'll also say that I like the combat in Avengers more than I do in Godfall. Keep in mind that I still like both of these aspects in both games. I'm just excited because Godfall has evoked such a unique unique reaction to me when it comes to loot, something that up until now hasn't been the most exciting part of video games for me. Now again, I'm super inexperienced when it comes to gear and loot in video games, but it's becoming clear to me that the more looters I play, the more I learn. And I had a really great time with the loot in Godfall, and I'm excited to learn more about it. And I'm excited to learn more about loot in video games in general. Oh no. It grabs... Twilight Informant? Is that you? There we go. Okay, yeah, I gotta deal with this. It's normal, don't worry. Okay, what do you got to say today? Carrot Boy. Discover a true living experience. Venture into the second world of fates from the wings of a sparrow, the Twilight Informant. Okay, I'm getting better at understanding what you're saying, but I'm gonna need you to be like a little bit more direct with me. There we go. Okay, let's see. This one should make more sense now. Seriously, I'm telling you to play and speak about the excellent game Destiny. With clarification, the Twilight Informant. I don't want to talk about Destiny. I don't even want to play. All right. Let's put it this way. I'm paid by some very powerful people to keep eyes on you. If you don't talk about Destiny, I'll tell them about this video. Knives and Daggers, the Twilight Informant. Oh my... Duh, you're the informant that told my job last time that I was recording on the clock. Well, I'm not going to do it, like, now. I'm talking about Godfall right now. Can I do it, like... Can I give you an IOU? Can I do it later? Okay, let's see. Yeah, no rush. I'm pretty laid back once you get to know me. Chilling out, the Twilight Informant. Okay, so I owe you a video on Destiny. I'm not excited about that, but I appreciate the discretion. Hey, do you want to stick around and listen to me talk about Godfall? It feels like nobody wants to listen to what I have to say on this channel. That's just the feeling I get. To keep it simple, the story of Godfall follows Orin, who once allied with his brother Marcos to defeat the gods of their world and free their people. However, Orin's brother had less than noble intentions, for after the final Godfall, he betrayed his brother. Now Orin, controlled by the player, is on a journey to become powerful enough to stop Marcos from becoming a god himself. The story is very simple, and I'll admit it's a little generic, but honestly, I'm kind of into it. It gives you just enough to be invested with the main character's quest, to keep you motivated while you play to find out more about the story. It almost reminds me of like a samurai film. The motivation is very simple and revolves around an iconic conflict. In this case, it's kind of a rivalry revenge story. However, I think another part of Godfall's story that is interesting to me is that it feels like the game is more concerned about explaining its lore than telling the best story, which I think is interesting depending on the player. The lore for the world of Godfall is surprisingly deep. When I was looking into the history of the world and how it all works, I was surprised at how much depth went into the history of the world before the story actually starts. Like I said, I'm invested in the simple story that they've given, and with that investment, I'm open to other aspects of the story that they want to communicate with me. I think my biggest con about the storytelling so far is the voice acting. Some, but not all of the voice acting is a little flat in my opinion. I think I'd blame my problems with the voice acting more so on the directing of the voice acting rather than the voice actors themselves. I found myself admiring the voices in the game, however I regularly felt as if certain lines could have been delivered in a better way. Specifically, I think the protagonist has a really great voice, but the way he delivers his lines just isn't my cup of tea. There are just so many moments where I'm thinking, you couldn't have delivered that line like a little bit better? Like, you sound cool, and I feel like you said something cool, but I didn't believe it. Those kind of moments, you know? But overall, I really like the world of Godfall, and I feel like it's one of the most attractive parts of the game so far, even if the story it's trying to tell is a little simple. Now, continuing the discussion on presentation, the game is absolutely beautiful. When I think of the PlayStation 5, one of the first games that comes to my mind is Godfall. Even though it took me until 2022 to play it, Godfall is a PS5 game to me. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a sword guy, so when I see people fighting with swords, I'm almost immediately invested. But there's also a lot of other design elements to Godfall that make it really appealing to me. I like that everyone is wearing this really regal armor. I like that while the majority of weapons are blades, that there are still projectile weapons including guns, which is really weird and cool, and I like that mixture of futuristic and modern. It just looks like a very visually distinct game. It's genuinely a gorgeously designed world, but it's also rendered really beautifully on the PlayStation 5. The creators of the game deserve some serious props for how pretty it came out. That being said, as someone who's gotten really into virtual photography, I wish there was a way for me to capture these beautiful moments with a photo mode in the game, but there isn't one. I think it's really odd that the game doesn't have a photo mode, and I'm sure many players would appreciate it. The last thing I'll say about presentation in Godfall is that I really like a lot of the music in the game so far. I'm not going to say the soundtrack is incredible or necessarily innovative. In fact, I think many tracks did feel a little generic to me. However, that being said, there were a couple of tracks that really stood out to me. Simple tracks that mixed orchestra and synthesizers that kept this music stuck in my head after playing. So I'm curious to hear the rest of the soundtrack moving forward. And those are my general thoughts on the story and presentation of Godfall. So that's my first experience with Godfall. I gotta be honest, I didn't expect to feel the way that I do about the game right now. I feel like this video is almost like my beta review for Marvel's Avengers back in the day. Like, clearly I was excited about Godfall, which is why I bought it. But the fact that I was this excited to talk about my early thoughts reminds me of how excited I was about Avengers way back. In addition, there are a number of other similarities Avengers shares with Godfall in terms of gameplay. Honestly, at this point, I feel like if you're a fan of Marvel's Avengers, you might enjoy playing Godfall. So check it out if you're interested, especially if it goes on sale. If you're not familiar with Godfall, the game has a pretty dedicated player base, and to my surprise, new content released pretty regularly. So I'm not sure where this game will take me in the future, but for the time being, I think I want to keep you updated on my feelings of the game moving forward. Because so far, my first chapter with Godfall has proven to me that it's an experience that I'm probably going to enjoy moving forward. But again, as always, remember, my opinions are subject to change, and who knows if I'll still feel this way about the game in a week. But as for writing the script of this video, I'm really enjoying the game, and I really like what it has to offer. And I can't wait to see the new content that's coming out for it. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. I want to thank you so much for watching. If for some reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel for more. As regular viewers know, I make a variety of content on my channel, and I'm always gonna make the videos that I want to make. But if you see something you enjoy, make sure to let me know, and I'll try to prioritize that kind of content in the future. Or you can send me a secret note down my steps and force me to review Destiny. That's another option for you. Don't do that. Please don't do that. I'm asking nicely, don't do that. If you want to watch me play video games live, check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/carrotscraps, and all my other social media, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram are at carrotscraps as well. I want to thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. What is up with this place? Time travelers and note stare people. At the very least, you know, I thought this place was haunted for a little bit there. At least it's not haunted. Those are all the lights that just shut off. Oh, okay.